Hello, ladies. It's Renee, host of the Welcome to Your Life podcast. Have you thought of recording your own podcast, but the thought of learning new technology was too frightening? I know exactly how you feel. That's how I felt until I found Anchor. Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place, and it's free. You can record from your phone or your computer, and the creation tools allow you to record and edit your podcast so it sounds great. They'll even distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard everywhere on places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many, many more. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Trust me, you will not regret it. Hello, my friends. You are listening to episode 24 of the Welcome to Your Life podcast. I am your host, certified health coach Renee Reed. In today's episode, my son Matt and I are back with another edition of Generation Gap. Can a baby boomer and millennial agree on anything? Today we are tackling the question many baby boomer parents are asking. Why have millennials stopped going to church? And what can a parent do to get them back in the pews? We'd love to hear from you. If you have a topic you'd like us to tackle on a future episode of Generation Gap, email us at info@reneereed.net. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a bonus episode of the Welcome to Your Life podcast. I am your host, Renee Reed, and we are calling this special segment of the podcast Generation Gap. Can a baby boomer and a millennial agree on anything? Once again, I am joined by my son, Matt Thompson, and Matt and I are going to try and save the world today. Or, short of that, we will be unpacking this question. Why are millennials leaving the church? Now, this topic is especially important to me and my baby boomer friends because we are all trying to figure out why the children that we have raised in the church no longer attend. But before we dive into our topic today, Matt, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me back on. I would like to just introduce myself as Matthew really quick, just because if you're not familiar with me, don't call me Matt just yet. You know what I'm saying? You might want to ask. No, but I'm good. I'm doing good. You know, back in New York, settling into the school year and whatnot.
Oh, okay. So what's happening in New York? What have you been up to since our last episode?
A lot of writing. I've been doing a lot of writing. Right now I'm attending a Kaveh Khanum workshop, Beat That Dead Horse, with Angel Peace. Going to some screenplay and screenwriting workshops and essay workshops, trying to get my book and some pitches in order. So yeah, it's a lot of work. I don't know what the rest of New York is doing, running around being crazy, probably doing meth. I don't know what they do. They are doing meth, so that is not a joke. But that's not what we're talking about.
Okay. That's for another show.
We honestly, it's the thing, opioid, whatever, but we can talk about it.
So today we're talking about why millennials have left the church. And so before we get started, let me read this quote. Now this is from an article on the CBN News website, not a source I would normally listen to. They're a little more to the right than I am, but this quote,
the right meaning conservative?
Yes. But I found this quote really interesting, and it was backed up by some other research that I did for this episode. So they write, the church has faced consistent struggles over the past centuries, and one particular struggle may cause a future epidemic. Research indicates millennials, individuals ages 22 to 37, have been leaving the church in alarming numbers. One study shows 59% of millennials raised in the church have already left. Now, I am thinking that this stat has some credence to it, mostly because the 5 individuals that I raised in the church have left. So, and I am still trying to understand that, every Sunday that I attend, I am praying that you guys are attending somewhere, wherever you are in the world. But tell me, what are your recollections of church? You tell me your recollections of church, and then I'll tell you mine.
So, growing up, we were a very church-heavy family. Went to church, I would say at least 4 days out of a 7-day week. There was Bible study, there was choir rehearsal, there was actual church on Sundays, and then, what am I missing? A Saturday thing. There was always, we also just, kind of were around, always, building up the church, doing car washes, helping out with fundraisers in the neighborhood, stuff like that. So my early recollections are being there very heavily, and learning and growing in the church with my family, building community in the church, building a family in the church. We very much, growing up, Christ the King, Kojic, Christ the King, Church of God in Christ, it was a very tight-knit church. Everybody was in everybody's business, but everybody also was giving everyone, a pat on the back, a prayer, a 20 in your hand when you're on the way out because we know that you're hurting this week, whatever it was. And so my early recollections of church were very positive, I guess. And I say I guess because I don't know why I just said the word positive. I want to describe it without any qualifiers until we really dive in. But yeah, my early recollections are being there quite frequently and recognizing that space of church also as a family building space.
Right. It was a family church. Everyone who attended was related to someone. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't a big church. And I think that's what made it so great, because we were able to, get to know each other on a really, personal level and be supportive of each other. Whatever crisis, was happening, we were there to help each other out. And I think that is, one of the things I loved about our church. But yes, you have been in church all of your life. All of your life. As a matter of fact, when I answered the call to accept Christ as my Savior, we were at Avon Baptist Church. Reverend Chapman, he's gone home to be with the Lord now, but he opened the doors of the church one Sunday, and you were 11 months old. I handed you over to your godmother, Aunt Valerie, and I took that walk down the aisle and haven't looked back since. And
no peeks back.
No peeks back. Like
no
I never, you know, I've never questioned the relationship that I have with God. And I always say I'm his hard-headed child, because I need to try it my way before I do it his way. But even in doing that, he has, never turned his back on me. And that is the relationship I prayed and that, Granny prayed that you guys would have with him. And so that's why going was so important. And church was not always important to me. There was a long time when I didn't want anything to do with religion. And the only reason I actually started going after I had kids was because Grandma Martha would ask me every Sunday, did you take those kids to church? And I did not want to keep telling her, no, I didn't.
No. Did not.
And no, because you just did not tell Martha Butler that. And also, and then I couldn't lie to her and say, oh, yeah, we went, So I just accepted Aunt Valerie's invitation to go with no expectation.
Valerie was going to church?
Yes, every Sunday.
I mean, I ain't calling you Aunt Valerie if you're listening, but I just a little, I'm learning.
Yes.
Moving on.
Yes, we accepted her invitation. We went, and I had no expectations of going. My only expectation was no expectation. It was just something I checked off my list. Yes, Grandma, we went to church.
Mm-hmm.
And then
like
one day, right, something clicked. And so,
can I ask you, what did that click feel like for you? That click was like, I need to go up here and submit to the Lord.
It felt like the road I'm on is not working. And I remember what Reverend Chapman said. He said, if you need something else, if what you're doing is not working, the doors of the church are open. Like, he didn't make any grandiose speech or anything like that. It was just plain. He was a plain and simple, Bible preaching preacher. Like, he didn't sugarcoat stuff or overdo, and he was just very, if your life isn't working, the doors of the church are open. And that was it. And it just, it was, and we had been going a couple of months by then. And it was
at that point, though, excuse me, but at that point, what wasn't working? Or what were your, because as we're talking about why are millennials leaving the church, I'm wondering what brought Christians to the church. Because I think, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the question of why are millennials leaving the church, this feeling and also the reality that whatever I'm here for, it's not being delivered. And so I guess I'm curious about when that thing that millennials may think is lacking, when that thing is not lacking, what is being fulfilled for you?
So what is, when you say what is being fulfilled, what do you think is or I guess this generation, and I'm not lumping all of you guys together, but this generation knows more or seems to know more or thinks they know more than any generation than any generation before you guys. And I'm sure, of course, because now you're the generation that grew up with the internet. So everything you need to know, is at the touch of your hand.
Right.
But it's also given you guys I don't want to say lack of humbleness.
Oh, we've heard it before. You can go ahead and say it.
A lack of humbleness, a lack of, wanting to submit to any authority, let alone Christ, but any authority. I've had clients who were millennials who, we worked months to just get them into a job, and then the manager will say something like, well, why are you're late? Your shift started 10 minutes ago. And this person was offended. Like, what do you mean I'm here? You're not even paying me enough to come in at 7 o'clock, but I'm here at 7 o'clock. It was like, what? So it's like the things that, and I know some of the things that the young people said, their reasons for leaving was because they felt the church was not aggressively pursuing topics that were important to them, social justice, sexuality, environmental justice. And those, when you ask what brought people into the church, especially into the Black church, it was those things. Historically, the Black church has been the centerpiece of the community, and that's where you went for everything, because you could not find someone to help you in the larger society. And
right.
so
you had churches providing more than just a word, providing daycare, providing health care, providing meals, providing haircuts.
Exactly. And fighting for voter rights and equal pay and
canvassing the neighborhoods to get people registered to vote even.
Right. So exactly. So maybe the church is not aggressively pursuing those topics like it used to. But I don't know. Do you think that they are? Let me not put words into your millennial mouth.
Well, so the last time I went to church, when's the last time I went? The last time I remember going, I was in Milwaukee, and I was like dating this guy at the time, and his best friend was a preacher's kid who came up to Milwaukee to like kick it for the weekend, but to also like suss out and check out some other churches for her family or whatever. And I think also just like looking for other guidance and other words to like listen and live by or whatever, potentially, I don't know, but definitely to like check out some other churches. And when I was there, I may or may not have had a hangover while we were there, just for full disclosure. But I guess when I was there, I didn't have the experience that I remember having growing up in the church. Like, I remember growing up in church and, like, feeling the Spirit move. I remember, like, having this deep desire for prayer, and for the Bible and for the Word of the Lord. And the last time I was in the church, I didn't have those same things weren't clicking through my mind and through my body. And so when I think now, sometimes I do think about maybe I need to go to church, maybe I need a word, if I'm down or if I'm in a space where I need a bit of uplifting, or maybe I've just talked myself in circles and I need like a third party or a higher power even to intervene in my own mess. But I guess my reluctance now, as far as going back to the church, it really isn't even so much tied to sexuality for me. I think a lot of my early issues with the church definitely were tied to sexuality. As a Black queer person, I felt ostracized in the church, but I also felt attacked a lot of the time in ways that weren't. I think it's fine if you are reading the Bible and you think it's saying like homosexuality is a sin. I think that's fine. But I think the way that I think that read of it is fine, if that is what you feel like you're reading. But I think the way that the church early 2000s keyed in on like homosexuality and this conversation around like DL Black men and what they're doing to Black families and what they're doing to Black women, it was all strange. And also like with a bow on top, being told at that same time, oh, and also masturbation is wrong. I'm just like, oh, okay, like.
Let me just throw that in.
It's just like, with these, what should I be? How do I engage with myself sexually if I can't? How do I think about myself as a sexual being if I am not supposed to? Because of the type of sex that I'm interested in seems to discuss your Lord and Savior. The church wasn't giving me a way to think through any of the urgencies that were on my mind. That's why I had to leave the church. Because I would say, like, before I left the church in undergrad, I was in 3 different Bible studies, all different types, too. Like, I was with the Black kids who were non-denominational, doing their thing, Bible studies every Wednesday night. We all take the bus over at Kent. We take the bus out to Talmadge. Span Ministries, shout out. It's a good church. I want to say Pastor Brandon Glass over there was doing a lot of really good work. I don't think I'm botching that name. I'm pretty sure that's his name. Because, it's been some years since I done stepped in there. And I just feel like in that hunt, I'm going to Span. I'm going to hang out with the white boys who are just, like, doing, like, a brotherhood thing, and they're cussing in their prayers, and we're talking about Kanye and Illuminati stuff, but, like, still, like, reading the Bible and just, like, communing with one another and, like, helping one another through those urgencies, the things that were on our mind, like grades, like not having any money, like feeling distant from our family, so like that loneliness. So there was a brotherhood there, and then another like Bible study situation on campus. I really was trying and doing my thing and reading, and there just was no. I guess at that time I was looking for answers. But I also was looking for conversation. The church, in the way that I knew it, in the Bible, in the way that I read it, didn't leave any room for conversation. And so maybe that's the millennial in me saying, like, no, you're not just going to tell me to shut up. Like, I need to know, you know what I'm saying? Because we grew up being able to type any question we had into Jeeves. Y'all remember Ask Jeeves? Into
right.
Ask Jeeves, into Google. And I think the church, I was looking for some guidance in ways that the church didn't seem interested in providing. The church seemed very interested in proclaiming things that I did not see for my life, but at the same time was not interested in helping me arrive at any clarity. And so I had to leave the church for clarity. I had to leave the church to understand that because in my reading, when the Bible says, you know, God is speaking and says you were made in my image, I'm trying to understand what that means. That's not a passage I can just skip over. And it seemed often as if I was not supposed to think of myself as someone godly, as someone deserving of anything except hell, except condemnation in some sense. You know, it's like, it was this weird kind of space of like whatever you did that wasn't completely aligned with the word of the Lord and whatever interpretation I was being taught, you know, because when I go to all these different Bible studies and whatnot, I'm seeing like, oh, everyone's not reading this the same. And that's fine too. But I think that's where the conversation needs to be engaged. It needs to spark and be looking for not answers, but just to have people settled in their own interpretations. But what I was going to say is I was in this place in church where it was very much like, well, you did that and you deserve this. And I didn't understand like this spitefulness. I was not interested in serving a God that was spiteful. That seemed a little bratty, to be honest. Like, what do you mean? If I don't do this, then you're gonna do that. It's just like a bad relationship, and I wasn't interested in like this bratty, cisgender, you know, because then there's all this stuff about, well, you know, you have to praise him, and that he is very heavy, and I don't think for a lot of people it is, because they're not maybe asking questions around gender, patriarchy, sexuality, but for those of us who are, and you're giving us this capital H he all the time, there's something rubbing me wrong there. There's something that seems also as a Black American that seems a little, because in all honesty, my questions around sexuality and gender aren't what ultimately made me even question the word of the Lord more harshly. What got me to the point of really being like, yo, what the F is this? Was when I was learning more about my history and my heritage as a Black American and as someone that's an ascendant of enslaved Africans. I'm like, what is this book that we're reading and why? How did this book get into my hand? How has this book been used to manipulate me into submitting not to the Lord, in my mind, to really submitting to the will of like white colonizers and other weird white people who are trying to have it their way, who are trying to have me their way.
And yes, the Bible has been used, you know.
Can we admit that?
Well,
I think a lot of
I think a lot of people don't. Right. I think a lot of people don't want to admit that. But, you know, as a historian, I have to not only admit it, but, you know, I have to come to the realization that as a historian and as a Christian, that this is real. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, the Bible has been used not only to subjugate Black people, but women,
right.
You know, and so being a Black woman, I have it coming at me on both ends,
Mm-hmm.
So I had to really study, and I think that's where personal study comes into play. Not just taking the words of the guy in the pulpit, but the one thing that I love about the Bible and about this relationship is that we get to have a relationship. You get to build a relationship with, you know, a being who we are created in his image. But in order to build that relationship, you have to study his word.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times we get the word mixed up with church doctrine, and that's a totally different thing. You know, Jesus was love, period. Like, he didn't, you know, one of the reasons they hated him was because he ate with the tax collectors and the poor and, you know, people that, you know, other people thought were undeserving, but he thought they were even more deserving.
Yeah, but so, I think the church is not doing its self-justice when it doesn't mimic those same behaviors.
So is it the church's, I think on one hand it is the church's responsibility to, you know, not to put doctrine over biblical teaching, but then where does the responsibility of the millennial come in to search for that connection?
Yeah.
Like, one of the things that is coming up now is this growth of millennials who say they have no religion. So they call them the nuns.
The nun movement.
Yeah, the nun movement.
Not nuns, not the cuties. These are some
not N-U-N, but N-O-N-S. So, you know, and yes, people who didn't believe would sometimes stay in a church because that was socially acceptable. And so you went to church on Sunday. You may have been out all night on Saturday, Friday and Saturday, but you went to church on Sunday because that is what was expected of a respectable person.
Yeah.
And so the millennials have said, no, that's not who we are. That's not.
I think it's a question of value, though. Also, I think when you use, especially when you use the word respectable person, I think those notions are being challenged, and particularly by a lot of young Black Americans who are looking at the civil rights movement and, you know, are appreciating the ways that it was effective, but are also looking to see in which ways was the civil rights movement ineffective. And I think the whole idea, and even, you know, to actually pull it in a larger sense, like the LGBTQ movement, and I bring up both because you had like these Black people who are marching and being sprayed by water hoses and being denied jobs and whatnot, but they're still wearing suits every day with this intention of, we're going to show them that we're citizens, we're going to show them that we deserve respect. And then on the other side of the street, this other movement is happening, you know, later on that begins to happen where you have these queer people who are being told, like, well, just you know, dress like the rest of the people, act like the rest of the people. And so it's this notion that, well, if you're respectable, you'll be treated with respect, and then not seeing that correlation. You know, we're also now seeing for the, another quote from CBN, and they say, for the first time in U.S. history, single adults outnumber married ones. And we're seeing a lot of people my age not, questioning marriage and questioning a lot of these institutions. So I think what we're also just seeing is like a shift in traditions, a shift in values. A lot of it isn't even, I would think, of a direct pushback against Christianity, but just a disinterest, wondering what other ways can people live and be in the world that aren't like these older modes that have potentially proven to some people to be ineffective, to leave them sad and depressed and anxious.
Do you think that, so that brings me back to my question. Do you think that yes, the church bears some responsibility, but what responsibility lies at the feet of the millennial to find that connection to,
I think people are looking, I'm sorry.
To their, higher power.
Well, people are looking for that. I think also, though, millennials are very sensitive. Let's just be honest. Like, my generation is a generation of, where's my medal? Everyone else got a medal. And so, this is a very sensitive generation. And so people are looking for that, for that higher power, for that guidance, without the judgment. So when you have a lot of people, we've off mic talked about COSAR and astrology movements and just the growing interest. And maybe not even growing, because I don't know those numbers exactly, but some people say it's growing. This growing interest in astrology and people going to look up their sun sign, their rising sign, their moon sign, what is my Capricorn, all of this stuff, to find out who they are, to find out where they can make connections, to find out about this deeper self, without the judgment of, well, what were you doing with your Saturday night? Or who did you kiss last night? Or, like, did you masturbate? Because in all honesty, I think that's great. I can't follow anything that tells me I can't masturbate. That is an affront to my body. I mean, I think the church has to reckon with its aversion to desire.
Okay, but where does the church has always been the moral compass of the society. So where it's almost like millennials want to create a new list of right and wrong, or there are no wrongs. There are no wrongs, and everything should just be acceptable.
The church would say we're living in Babylon. I wouldn't disagree. I think that we are definitely, because I personally am definitely looking for new morals and ethical codes to follow. Because the ones that I watched and the ones that I was being taught growing up, they weren't conducive or interested in a human experience, if that makes any sense. So that's where I say that saying that I can't masturbate is a sin, it's going to send me to hell, is a personal affront. In what way is that realistic? Or not even realistic, but in what way does that have my humanity in mind? And maybe, that the Bible also says, be in the world, not of the world, and has this whole thing about, like, the body is the body, but it's the spiritual self that you're called to answer to. And I will say, I do think that with the internet and the pervasiveness of the internet, that there is this connection between body and spirit, mind, body, and spirit, amongst people in my generation. If you ask somebody about their spirit, people are literally, And I like CoStar. I think it's a cool app. I think it says some funny things some days, or some things that are really poignant. And I'm like, oh, geez, I am in that place. But I think this idea that your phone can be the doubt for you, I think that is kind of silly. But I do understand, I understand the people that I'm around. I understand that this is what they live by. This is what they know, and it works for them. And for me, if the church is interested, we're having this conversation, but if the church is interested in why people are leaving, I think the church needs to make some adjustments, and I would be interested to see what some of those adjustments could be.
And I think some churches are making adjustments.
Yeah, but I mean,
I don't know if it's
you can
more.
wear jeans. You know what I mean?
Well, a lot of churches are saying that. I mean, we had wear your favorite football jersey day, but but I think a lot of churches, not a lot, but there are some churches who are trying to find that connection with millennials. There are churches who are trying to set aside church doctrine and church worldviews and really teach millennials how to build that relationship with Christ. And I think, and I always, told you guys that Christ, is not the doctrine. Christ didn't say anything about women wearing makeup or,
right.
Where you had to wear long dresses or you couldn't wear jewelry or you had to cover your head. None of that. He didn't say any of that. That was all some church, leader who wanted to start a denomination and have his denomination be purer than the next denomination. So in order to do that, of course, women had to bear the brunt of it. Yes,
yeah.
But there is a relationship that you build with Christ as you study his word, as you pray and fast and just humble yourself and open yourself up. See, and that's the key. That's the thing.
That's the hard part.
Yes, that is the hard part. So it's not, yes, you can search and search and search. People go to church for different reasons. People look for a church that has certain things. Some people want a younger church. Some people want, a church that's conservative, all white, all black, non-denominational. Some people want a church that has, a large percentage of children in it because they have kids and they want their kids to make friends with other Christian kids.
Some people want a pop and choir.
Right. Exactly. If the choir isn't good, they don't want to come back. Some people want a pastor who shouts and yells and preaches, speaks in tongue, and then other people are like, okay, that's crazy.
Okay.
I'm not coming back here. So it's like, but everybody wants God to twist and bend and turn to be what they want him to be. And what it boils down to is that he is God, he is the creator, and we are the clay. And can we be humble enough to allow him to show us the way? And that is what, and I understand what you're saying about church doctrine. Because, like I said, as a woman, I've had faced that, children can't, or as a woman, I've been in churches where the men sit in the front and the women with children sit in the back. What?
Mm-hmm.
Like, dividing families, or where women aren't allowed to preach,
Mm-hmm.
And that none of that made sense. But I had to set all of that aside, because when you are called to be a disciple, an evangelist, if you are consistent, if you pursue him, the Bible says to seek him while he may be found. If you pursue him, he will show you your place in the world, regardless of who you are. He will show you your place in the world. You just have to be, but you have to be humble enough and open enough to, to receive that instruction. And that's where millennials, fall off the cliff. They're like...
But so for me, though, it's very like what you're saying, that even that humbling, I've had to do that with, like, I really live in that idea of, like, I was made in God's image. And so in me understanding and knowing that, me understanding and knowing myself as a God, me knowing and understanding that I have to humble myself to my own will, if that makes any sense. Like, the church, the Bible, I've studied the Bible. I've walked around for years with a Bible in my book bag through K through 12, just had a Bible in my book bag. Everybody's talking about ESPN last night. I'm reading my little scriptures before church. It was a ritual for me to settle into myself before the day started, and to also just orient myself within a word that could hold me. And so, in my understanding of the Bible and of the stories of the Bible, it's one of the greatest books ever written. It's just a fantastic story. And what I know now is that the Bible is not, the church seemingly is interested in me not knowing myself. The Bible is not. The word of the Lord is not. God is not. And if I'm listening to God, I need to come back to myself. And so that is what my journey has been since leaving the church, is trying to understand me and all of my wonder and all of my free will, and, like, what can I create? Like, at the same time as you're saying we're the clay, we're also the creators. We're also the hands that, and so I'm like, I'm trying to live in this, and I'm going to say duality, but I think it's more vast than a duality. I'm trying to live in this multiplicity of self, of mind, body, spirit, of human connection, of interpersonal connection, of life connection. And I think there's so much God in that. And I found myself feel more whole, not always. And in all honesty, like I was at workshop last night, I was saying whenever I am trying to self-regulate, well, I'll read a little bit, actually. So we were in workshop, and we had a prompt. It's called The Path You Almost Took, the prompt. It's like we had no instruction. It was just like, the path you almost took. Right about that. And I'll read up to here. Real short. Whenever I try to self-regulate, I resort to Christian rituals, like fasting, washing myself, soaked in hot water with oil, burning candles, and no song. I first talk out loud to the God in my chest, then look to the sky, scream a word I see snatched by no hand, amen. And like I come back to these rituals because they are very grounding for me. But you know, the when we look at the definition of church, that's just like the gathering of people, and I think that gathering of people has just created a lot of fraught relationships with individuals, and either that fraught relationship between that person and themselves, that person and their God, that person in the group of people, that person in the book, the word. And so I think people are retreating to find a grounding that they have not been able to find in the church, in that gathering of folks. At least for me.
But then that brings me back. But that just brings me back to my question: how much of this do millennials have to take responsibility for? You know,
well,
whenever
I don't think there's an interest to take responsibility, because it's just like, I'm gonna wash my hands of it. Like, y'all can keep it.
But every time there is a crisis, you know, after 9/11, people flocked to the church.
Yeah.
You know, looking for answers, looking for comfort, trying to heal. And now you have people looking to, you know, like you said, astrology, or, you know, each other people, other millennials, other religions.
Buddhism, Scientology, Islam. You have like a sort of resurgence of Black Jewish folks in the U.S.
So people are searching for something.
They are, and that's why I just think
to ground
the
them.
Christian church is failing. It's not that it's not that millennials are so like, I know everything. Google has taught me all that I need to know. There's no God or pastor.
Some of them do think that, though.
I mean, you know, some people are whatever, but like, you know, it's not all that. A lot of it is just like, I'm not messing with y'all and what y'all is doing over there.
But
it's
then, how do you just stop? So do you just stop, or is that because that's what they're doing? They just wash their hands of it. Mm-hmm. And they're just, you know, they're just saying no more.
Mm-hmm.
So and I guess that's where, you know, because the church has always been under attack. But it's still here. So I think it's an epidemic, might be an epidemic of people leaving the church. When I was your age, I left the church. Mm-hmm. But I think as people, and I have no statistics for this is all from personal experience and from just the people that I know. And from what you just said, like when you find that you need to center yourself, mm-hmm. you go back to the rituals that brought you comfort.
Yeah.
And so I think that as you guys get older, and you find that your search has not yielded the results that you wanted,
I think what we're going to find.
Right. I think that's what you're going to find. And I think that you will, you know, come back. I think you will come back to church. I think as you get older, you will, I think you'll come back. And I think you'll come back because you'll be wiser, you'll have more life experience, and also because you will be hungry for something that you did not find in all of those other searches that you pursued. That's just my opinion. But I think like
what has the church helped you find?
It helped me find myself. It helped me find out who I was, and it helped me to be comfortable with who I was and where. And it wasn't the church necessarily, although I think the church that we were in was just a great place to grow and learn, and we just had awesome people there, and we had awesome leadership, and so it was just a good place. And so every church, and even now, I look to try to find that again, and that was just a once in a lifetime thing. Like I will never find that kind of connection to the people who shared the pews again. So I have to connect in other ways. But I cannot imagine, not being able to cry out to the Lord when I'm in pain. I can't imagine not having that connection with Him. And having enough faith to even talk about this topic, because a lot of people my age will not talk about this with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're afraid, number one, and number two, they're not open. They're not humble. They're not willing to listen to, what you guys are saying. So, but I believe that my faith is strong enough so that I can have this conversation with you and not feel threatened,
because millennials are sensitive, but so are Christians. Old and young, or elder and non-elder.
That's true. And so you have to if you follow in Christ's footsteps, who could be more sensitive than Him? I mean, if someone had the authority or the wherewithal to just say, look, it's my way or the highway. But that's not what He did. Like, He listened to people. He met them where they were in their walk. When He met the woman at the well, He could have said, look, you've had like 3 husbands. The man you're living with now is not your husband. He said it, but then He offered her, drink of this water. If you drink from this well, you'll never be thirsty again. So He met people where they were. The woman who was accused of adultery, He didn't throw stones at her. The church, and I'm using air quotes, would have thrown stones at her, but He didn't. He, said go, and now I just lost my train of thought. But anyway.
Go and do your thing, girl. If you want to go sleep with that man.
No, that's not what He said. No, that's not what He said. But He met them, He met people where they were. Mm-hmm. And that's why they followed Him, because He didn't condemn them. He didn't make them feel like they were less than he was. He didn't make them feel like they couldn't change or get better or grow or expand or achieve.
Or like they didn't deserve. Like, to me, it was so much about, like, all I deserve is, like, death and, like, hell. Unless I can, like, consistently maintain my behavior. A lot of I think the church just has a weird reputation of being like that mean principal. And it's like, I don't want to hang out with you. And so Christianity, if it can, needs to work on its reputation. Because it's definitely not garnering new membership with the word on the street about him.
So if we were to wrap this up, what would you tell millennials who are going to be listening to the program?
I would say to find a spiritual practice that hits all of the urgencies that are in your life the best way that they can. And I would say in your search for a spiritual practice for yourself, this is very much a trial and error game. And so if something is not working, don't sweat it or quit it immediately. Keep working at that. Also understand that you have other options that you will potentially need to continue to work on before it clicks for you. The spiritual game is not a quick and fast game. This is very much a long work. And so, commit to yourself in that way for this long work, if that is what you feel like it's going to sustain you over this time you have here. Because it can be harsh. A lot of people describe life as, like, so hard. And I don't always feel that way, but I do sometimes. And when I do feel that, I have my rituals and my people and my gods to come back to. And so find those for yourself, because it is fruitful. And the connections in that lack can be filled.
Well, I would.
Yeah, what would you say?
Yeah, it was everything that you said. But I would just encourage them to continue the study for themselves and to really begin to pray and submit to the Lord and ask for guidance. I think that's one of the things that people, not just millennials, but people in general, regardless of age, refuse to do, to pray and ask for, for guidance. Because if anyone could help with this issue, it would be him. And you're right, it is a long game. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. But the other thing is, and I don't know who said this, but, everybody is always throwing this quote around. Be the change that you want to see in the world. So sometimes, instead of working outside of an organization, you need to be inside of it to promote change and to create a path for other people to come in after you. Leaving the church on its own with people my age or older is just letting it sit in, staleness. It takes new blood and new ideas and new ways of doing things in order for any organization. I mean, any organization, in order for any organization to grow and to continue to be viable, it has to recruit fresh ideas. And so your generation has those ideas. If you want more focus on social justice, on sexuality, on environmental justice, on gender equality, if you want the focus, to be on those issues, then you have to be in the organization to help steer the powers that be towards those issues. And so I would encourage you guys to find your place in the organization, in the church, and to pray and ask for guidance.
Yeah.
So
Amen.
This has been look, amen.
Look.
This has been illuminating, to say the least. And as always, I have learned a lot. The one thing that I have learned as a parent of adult children is that it is better to to role model behavior instead of preaching behavior. So I would encourage all of my baby boomers out there that if you do want your children to return to church, stop yelling at them about not attending.
And I'll say to all the millennials listening, my aunt told me over the summer, and it's a gendered thing, but just for a second, an old man can learn a lot from a young man, or a young man can learn a lot from an old man. And I think that those lessons, I get that they can seem preachy or whatever, but a lot of the emptiness, you are receiving tips on how to fill it, but you aren't listening because it feels preachy or it feels whatever, and it's like, just hush and listen for a second. Put your sensitivity to the side. Good Lord. Because there's some lit people out here that actually know what they're talking about. And it's not all just like
your
blah,
mom.
blah, blah. Yeah, like my mother. So smart and so great.
But thank you. But yes, sometimes it's good to be quiet and listen. Sometimes it's good to, light the torches and lead the march, but sometimes it's good to be quiet and to listen. And so we will leave it at that. So Matt, where can people find you and your work?
So right now, you can find my stuff predominantly on social media at Blonde Matt, BLONDEMATTMATT. That's on Facebook, or not Facebook, that's on Twitter and Instagram. The website is coming soon, and we'll get there when we get there. But right now, at Blonde Matt is the best way to stay in touch with the work.
All righty. So until next time, I'm
Mommy.
sure. You're welcome. Thank you. I'm sure we will. I know, right? Who would have thought?
Me.
But we will be back with another titillating episode, I'm sure. And until next time, you all have a great night. And Matt, I will see you soon.
Peace.
Wow, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I would love to know how you moms navigate your child's decision not to continue going to church. I can tell you for me, it was a really hard pill to swallow because adult parenting is a hard pill for me to swallow, and I am still trying to get used to it. But I know, as many of you do too, that there comes a time when you have to let your children find their own way and just be there for them when they need you. As a Christian mom, I pray that my children will find their way back to the family church pew. But research has shown that it's not just Christian parents of millennials asking this question. Max Wiseman, a self-proclaimed non-traditional Jew, writes, I don't go to synagogue. This isn't because of a millennial rejection of my parents' Judaism, but my generation's longing to create and customize. While older generations feel comfortable in the wheelhouse of tradition, my generation wants to reinvent it. My parents and their synagogue friends love that their synagogue has its unique tunes and its tailored outlook on Jewish values. They also like that if they venture to another synagogue, be it in Brooklyn or Bangladesh, the tunes may be different, but there is a commonality and familiarity with the prayers and the values. For me, this commonality feels confining. Listen up, elders and baby boomers. If we want to bring the millennials back, we have to open up the dialogue and listen to what they need. The church or the synagogue can't be stalemated by tradition. It has to be alive and flow and meet the needs of the people that make up the congregation. After all, isn't that what Jesus did? He was, after all, a true social justice warrior. I will talk to you guys next time. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye for now.